7:47 in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's finish with a bit of focus on poetry, and quite appropriately, the title of the work is Poet Tree. Two words, poetry, as in a tree with poetry in it, poetry. It's the debut presentation from poet Keeron Isaac, featuring thoughts and experiences covering several topics such as life, learning, love, culture, faith. This collection tugs at the heart and soul. Trinbagonian readers will be delighted to find poems of familiar ideas and experiences, while the international reader will get a taste of what makes Trinidad and Tobago unique. It's available for purchase through direct message, Amazon, and Kindle, and Scribbles and Quills in Chaguanas. Well, we have the poet with us, Keeron Isaac. Keeron, it's a privilege to have you with us. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I really appreciate it. So I'm excited to chat.
Indeed. So tell us about, I mean, we've given the information about the availability of the publication. How long has it been out? How long has it been available?
Okay, so it was released December the 5th. So it's still I guess you could still call it a baby in terms of publication. It's still quite new. So
what sort of reaction have you had so far from those who would have acquired a copy?
So it's interesting that a lot of people don't know me as a writer, so a lot of them were pleasantly surprised. But so far the response has been really positive. And of course you want your book to sell, and the sales have been great, but also the messages of connection have been really great as well, because poetry is so subjective. You write these poems unique to you, and people have really been connecting to them. I even spoke with someone who she lost her husband, and she used this book as a way to connect with her daughter, because her husband would buy books for her daughter. So that was really special, and I was rendered a little speechless, which is strange to me because I'm an author and I write, I talk a lot. So I was kind of speechless by that, but it kind of proved that the book has already become so much bigger than myself,
Is this your first work of poetry?
Yes, it is my first publication. I wrote a lot when I was younger. I actually always wanted to publish a book. I just never knew when and how. I wrote when I was like about 10 or 11. I had a little notebook, but I lost it. And I'm kind of glad I did, because the writing wasn't that great, but it's a process about learning and growing up. And
where did that love come from, Keeron? Because I'm fascinated to understand at what point, because if you say you're writing, you're scribbling things from since 10, probably even earlier. Where did that love for writing and then poetry, where did that come from?
So actually, so this might be interesting. I actually grew up asthmatic, but I actually detested reading and writing. I found it kind of like a burden. But when I was younger, I think my mom and maybe her friends and I had some kind of coalition, who knows? But they would all buy me these Hardy Boy books when I was younger. For birthday gifts, and at first I was like, I don't really want this, but after getting into it, I actually really enjoyed it, and so I really love going to the mall, because it meant leaving with a new book. I would like borrow books from the church library and finish it before I even reached home, and I'm like, oh wow, I should have borrowed 2 instead, So I ended up really loving it, and through the pandemic, I was able to reconnect to that side of me, which was nice.
And tell me about the journey of actually putting things on paper for the poetry. Was there a start and end process, or is it a collection of things you've written over many years?
Yeah, so some of the pieces I wrote in high school. So the opening is a poem that I wrote with my communication studies teacher for a project, and that she really believed in me. So shout out to Miss Sasha Ali. She really believed in my writing. And there was another poem in it that I wrote for my friend, who's experiencing something with her father. And so those was the initial poems I wrote when I realized, okay, I'm onto something here. But it was only really through the pandemic itself that the bulk of these poems were written. So apart from those 2 poems, the other is about 100 and something poems, but they were all written during the pandemic. So it was a great process. I connected with my editor, and Shelley and Edwards Barron of Word Edits, WERD. And then my friend Antonia Figueroa, she painted the cover of the book. So if people can't see, it's a guy sitting under a tree, but instead of leaves, the leaves are actually pages. So she brought it to life. So shout out to Antonia Figueroa, Arts by Antonia on Instagram. So it was like a collective process. And I feel like all the parts really interplayed quite perfectly to help to bring my vision to life.
And as far as putting it together, I'm interested as well in finding out, were you inspired by any great poet, or did you just develop your own style? Because one of the things when I was failing English literature was learning about haiku and iambic pentameter and Robert Louis Stevenson and Wordsworth and so on. I mean, I failed everything. Clearly, you were fascinated by these things. Who inspired you as a poet?
So my major introduction to poetry would have been A World of Poetry, which is I'm not sure, it should be it should still be the CXC literature book. I could be wrong, but so that was like a collection of Caribbean writers. So there's one poem that really stood out to me, which is Epitaph by Dennis Scott. It's kind of a gruesome poem, but the imagery presented in it was really powerful, and it was just amazing to see other poets, using that kind of expression, and it really inspired me. And all these years later, I feel like it's kind of like coalesced into me writing this book.
And before we remind everybody, and you can remind everybody where they can access the book, is it an emotional experience writing poetry? Because you get the sense that, because you're bringing, as with writing, you're bringing out your emotions, and some things might be very, very close to you. Is it an emotional experience? Is it a cathartic kind of thing to be writing poetry?
Yeah, definitely. I found the process quite therapeutic, because this pandemic is crazy, blocked for school transfers, lost my granddad along the way. So it's interesting because even though I may not say something or say how I'm feeling, I was writing how I was feeling. So so I remember when I sent it off to print, I was like, okay, this is happening. This is like my friend was describing it. She said, Keeron, you're essentially releasing like a diary of your thoughts from like a male perspective. And I said, well, that's a good way to put it, because it's really my thoughts and processes over these past 2 years. So it's really, as you said, it really is cathartic and emotional to put it out, but it's kind of like freeing, So
when you finish, when you finally finish your last line of poetry and for the book and so on, was it a weight off your shoulders? Was it an emotional kind of thing? Was it how did you feel about it?
Yeah, it was a little overwhelming, because to get to this point, it was like all the things that didn't work out to now have this working out. So in order for this to happen, if the pandemic didn't block all of the transfers that I had in mind, I wouldn't have been releasing this. So when I actually finished it and I sent it to release, I kind of took a step back. I was like, okay, it was like processing everything that happened. But releasing it is quite freeing, and it feel like a kind of like a weight off of my shoulders.
And before I give you the chance to remind everybody where they could get the book. Everybody's asking me behind me, seeing that you read Hardy Boys and all that kind of thing. I am 57. I used to read Hardy Boys. I used to pick up a Hardy Boys by Stevens and Johnson's every Monday. But I mean, you don't look like 57. How old are you?
I'm 26 years old.
You're a little child. Keeron, Isaac.
Well, I mean, Hardy Boys transcends generations, so it's a good series.
Congratulations on your work. And before we conclude, just remind everybody where they can get the book once again, please.
Sure. So you guys can contact me, 763-8566, or Poetry World across all social media, Poetry World on Gmail. And it's also available on Amazon and Kindle, and Scribbles and Quills in Shogunas, and of this week is in Jadu's Arima, which is really exciting.
All right, so, yeah. Keeron, we want to congratulate you on your work, and indeed, your love for words, and indeed, the fact that you bring back my boy days with the mention of Hardy Boys, even though you are a little child yourself still, but congratulations once again, Keeron, for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Blessings.
You're more than welcome. Keeron Isaac, a young poet with us. We don't often get the opportunity to highlight brilliant young talents in works such as poetry, but I'm grateful that we had the opportunity this morning with so much else that could really eat out at your soul with all that is going on in Trinidad and Tobago. So let's take a look now after that very pleasant interview at the BBC World News Headlines.